Just another brother with another humble question. Just another brother with another humble question.
Welcome to another episode of A Brother with Questions. I am your host, B. Period. Thank you for joining me. Before we get going here, let's please like, subscribe to the channel. Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, Castbox, everything is, of course, A Brother with Questions. Let's jump right into this, man. We're going to do a reaction video here. This is a little story, man, that I don't think it's national. I haven't noticed it on a national level. I did hear about it. Happened out in Las Vegas. Let's check it out.
News 3 continues to investigate the brutal beating of a Rancho High School student last week. Metro Police accused around 15 people of throwing blows against this teen.
And this moment was recorded and shared on social media. News 3 first reporting on that graphic video last week. Our Kristen Drummond in studio with the latest on the case, which includes potential charges.
Sources tell me the teen beat up is 17 years old. He remains on life support following the fight last week near Rancho High School. I spoke with a lawyer today about the case.
That's the case. The case is you got a 15-year-old boy that was essentially jumped by a group of students. And at least now as of this reporting, the young man was in critical condition, but the update is the young man has since passed away and died as a result of his injuries. But let's keep going because they're going to show just a grainy video at least. We'll see. Let's go.
He does not represent anyone in this video you see here, but he addresses the likely charges the suspected minors may face if the teen dies.
Have you seen this video yet?
I have not.
Attorney Matthew Hoffman sitting down with me, watching for the first time this video circulating on social media. It shows the moment a 17-year-old punches another person.
Oh, no.
And then a nearby group retaliates by hitting and kicking the teen, hurting him so badly, Metro Police say he appeared unconscious after the fight. This situation happening in an alley near Rancho High School.
I mean, it's horrifying. That's terrible. The kid who struck has a right to defend himself. The other kids have a right to defend that kid. But that defense ultimately is weighed on a reasonableness standard. At what point was this necessary?
That's the big question now in this case.
So,
Metro Police continue
from everything that at least we can see from this particular video, I believe the young man who ultimately has passed hit a young man. And then once he hit a young man, as you can see, other young men came in and began to retaliate, beat him up. They ultimately, obviously, jumped him. And like I said, he has died from the injuries resulting from this particular incident. Now, background, because, this is America. The young man who ultimately died is a young white man. The young men who were beating him up seemed to be, at least from that video, they seemed to be black boys, young black boys. So, yeah, so that's where we're at. Let's keep going.
to investigate the fight. If police identify the people, Hoffman suspects their charges to include assault and battery, even potentially elevating to manslaughter if the teen dies. If all are minors, he expects them to face charges as adults.
You were negligent in intentionally doing something and somebody died. At some point, you're not defending anybody. You're just beating the hell out of somebody. And that's what it looked like.
Metro Police say the teen was taken to UMC. No update, though, yet regarding arrest in the case. As for the reason behind the fight, a teacher at Rancho High School tells me it's possibly over a nicotine packet. At least that's what the students are telling him.
Just click below and subscribe to new.
Be back about it. Quick. So there you go. The update that I've gotten or that I've seen. So they say that the fight stems potentially from some stolen headphones. and a vape pen, a marijuana vape pen. And so what's unclear is, at least from I haven't been able to decipher from what I've read and from what I've listened to, is how the young white kid, how he plays a role in if they had stole his headphones or his marijuana vape pen, and so now he was retaliating against the people who he thought stole it, or whatever the case may be. I'm not sure about that part. But at the end of the day, there was a stolen vape pen and some headphones, and as a result, there is now a dead young white kid. So I bring up this story for two reasons. Number one, the reporting on this story. That's the first thing. And so when I think about the reporting, so we have a young white kid who's died at the hands or injuries from being jumped by, the number is 15. Another update that they have, though, is there are at least 10 young men, all, to my knowledge, they're all black, that they have 10 that they've arrested 8 of those 10. They're looking for 2 more. They all range from the age of 13 to 17, and they are also being charged with murder. So young black boys beat up this young white kid dies. And so reporting, that was my first thing. So when you think about the reporting on this story, I find it interesting that this has not made national news. And I'm wondering, in part, I'm wondering why. Because I know, I just know that had the situation been flipped and a young black kid had died at the hands of 15 young white boys, this would be national news. We'd be hearing about this daily, and there would definitely be a racial aspect to this situation. So I'm wondering why the situation is being flipped. Why am I not hearing about this from a national standpoint? Because had it been flipped, I would have probably got presidents from at least the vice president. We had members of Congress speaking on it, but now we have nobody. Nobody's talking about it whatsoever, except obviously locally. So I think we got to do better. And here's what I mean by that. We got to have some consistency, because if we want people, I think anyway, if you want people to really pay attention to when negative things happen to young black kids, I think you have to highlight when negative things are happening to young white kids. And it has to be highlighted in the same manner in which you want the young black kids to be highlighted. It's no different than when we talk about kidnappings. We criticize and we say when the young white girl gets kidnapped, we say it's all over the news. When the young black girl gets kidnapped, we say nobody hears about it except locally. It's the same thing. It's got to be that same consistency, and that's how you change the perception of how we cover the news. So that's number one. I think we have to change that, because we can't demand something on our end that we're not demanding on the other. You got to do it equally. Otherwise, it's never going to be equal. My second thing is looking at the stats at this school. So the stats at this school, it's actually a majority minority school. There are more Hispanics than blacks, but there are mainly Hispanic and blacks at this school, and whites are actually in the minority at this particular school. If I remember right, to the tune of maybe 10%, maybe even a little bit less. So it's when I say it's majority minority, it is majority. But and so typical of our schools, another thing that sort of worries or kind of bothers me a little bit is it's almost probably there's almost an expectation that these kids are going to do this type of thing. And that bothers me. Because why in our schools, and again, this is not a majority black school, there's actually more Hispanics than blacks. And I want to say again, and I can't remember. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's almost 60% Hispanic, and then blacks are in the 20s or the 30s or something like that. But so it's not us, but in this situation, it seems to be us. But it's not us in terms of the majority. But again, at all these minority schools, there tends to be a high likelihood of fights, unruliness, and I'd imagine this happened a little bit away from school. But if this is how you act away from school, your in school behavior is probably not too far. And so again, why is that travel with us? And these are young men too. I wouldn't be surprised that they probably have some academic issues as well. And so again, I go back. Where is the change? When are we going to encourage and continue to encourage our kids to do better, so that we're not having these situations? Because this is not abnormal. I have a young man that I talked to, and he left the school that was probably very similar to this in terms of behavior. Now, the school that he left was actually a majority black school. So most of the students that were there, probably to the tune of 50% or so, are black. And so he left the school, and he's a young black kid too. But he left the school because it was not an environment he thought was going to be conducive. And so he came into the school, saw how what he says the students were disrespectful. He noticed how, and this began for him. He was watching students on the way to school and was like, "Man, y'all disrespect." And so, he gave me a scenario. He said, to get to this particular school, you depending on where you live, you have to cross the street. So you go from one side of the street to the other side of the street, and this is a pretty major highway. And so he said, as the students were crossing the street, number one, you know how the street goes, right? You have a certain time to get from point A to point B. Well, these students really didn't care about the time that they had to get from point A to point B. So they were taking their sweet little time. And so as they were taking their sweet little time, as you know, people have to make a left turn. You only got so much time to make a left turn. So because of how long they were taking, there were people trying to make a left turn that were getting upset because they were slowly walking across the street, and now it was time to make that left turn. And so because they didn't appreciate the fact that people were upset with them for taking their time, they started cussing people out who were trying to make the left turn, because obviously you don't have all day to make this left turn. So I need y'all to get out of the way. But they were stopping in the street, cussing people out because they were upset that they were taking too long across the street. So it started even before they got to the school. Then you get into school, and it's all according to the young man. I wasn't there. He got into the school, and the kids are fighting in school. They're yelling in the class, and so class isn't being able to conduct it. And then he took it so far to say even the teachers were disrespectful at this particular school. He's talking about how the teachers were unprofessional, to use his word. And the reason why he described that is because the teachers were cussing at the students. So it was like a full level of dysfunction from his perspective, that began with the students, but then continued into the school. And as far as he was concerned, as he saw, even in the administration and the administration of the school as well. And so the man said he only lasted 6 weeks. And then he said he had to get up out of there, and he had to find him a different school to go to, because that is not the environment he wanted to be in. And so I think about that school that he described, and I can only imagine that this particular school was similar. And so it just, we got to do better. We have to do better. We have to train our young boys to be better. We have to train our young women weren't involved in this situation, but I include them. We got to train all of our children to be better, and transition them back to a place where we go to school to learn, and we begin to value education again. Because The sad part of this whole story for me is that we have at a minimum 10 young men aged 13 to 17 who are more than likely. I find it very hard to believe that if they go to trial that they are not going to be convicted of murder, because they're charging all of these kids as adults. And so they're more than likely all going to be convicted of murder. And so some as young as 13, maybe they're turning 14, but even still, at 14, you're about to get a murder charge. And I don't know what the term of that is going to be, but let's say it's 25 years, right? So you can get out at 40 with no skills. Maybe in jail you get a high school GED or something like that, but then essentially you have no skills. If it's life, you're at 14, your life is over. And so I think about these families, the mothers, the fathers, the grandmothers, whomever was raising these young men. And the sadness, this has to be 10 families full of sadness. All because of a headphone and a vape pen. A vape pen that you're not even old enough to have. And a set of headphones that, let's say with earpods, $200. Still nothing. A murder charge for $200 and a vape pen? It's sad. It's sad. But 2 lessons. We got to cover these stories the same way. And we got to demand justice in the same way. Because if we can't do it for them, we'll never get them to do it for us. And secondly, we got to demand more of our young men and women. Because it is sad that we have to watch these 10 young men ruin their lives over 5 minutes. If that, probably was only 2 or 3. And over a couple $100. And so, talk to your young men. Talk to the young women that you're around so that they know not to make these kinds of mistakes. So that they know to think about your actions before you do them. Because I don't care what it is, it's never worth this. And this pride and ego that we have, because there's this notion out there that everybody's got to respect me. That's foolish. And that sounds good in a movie. But the reality is, what it's going to take to make everybody respect you is going to end you up just like one of these young men. Because there's no world where everybody respects you in the way that you think you do, that you demand, I should say. Because even the people who will smile in your face will stab you on your back. So at the end of the day, they still didn't respect you. They just put it to the side because they understand. I can get you. I may not be able to get you in your face, but I can get you. So you got to learn how to let some stuff go. Because your life, your freedom is worth more than any kind of pride that you may possess. And on that note, I'm out, man. I'm B period, man. Until next time, I'm out.